Welcome back to the 2022 Men's College Basketball Bracketology video, and let's get right into it with this week's seeding changes and a big switch at number 1. I've moved Arizona in. Purdue was there last week. They suffered the loss, of course, to Michigan. Tough road environment, but Arizona is here now, cruising in the Pac-12, and they should be able to grab that Pac-12 title. The other team I was considering is one we'll get to later in Gonzaga. They are also cruising, just got that win over Pepperdine last night. Moving on to our 8-9 matchup, we've got Loyola Chicago, who's rolling, and they've got a big date against Drake this Saturday, and that will probably be their last test in the MVC, and then they will play Wake Forest, who is rolling out of the ACC. Then we've got number 5 seed Ohio State, who's coming off the win at Michigan on Saturday and then beat Minnesota earlier this week. So they are cruising in their own right. And then number 12 seed, we've got North Texas. This team is the auto qualifier from this Conference USA right now. But even if they aren't, they are probably in the bracket as they are above the likes of SMU and Miami and the other play-in game, which we will get to later. Then at the number 4 seed, we've got Texas, who just lost at Baylor, but then picked up the win at Oklahoma in a very close and sketchy game in overtime, but they were the better team in overtime and got it done there to remain at the 4 seed. Ohio out of the MAC stays at the 13 seed. They are an auto qualifier right now. Moving on to the bottom half, we've got number 3 seed Tennessee, who just won that monster game over Kentucky, and they rolled in that one. They're now on a 5-game win streak, and they've got a tough match at Arkansas, a very hot Arkansas team, and then they'll play Auburn again, and then they've got Arkansas to finish the year, so not an easy schedule by any stretch of the imagination for Tennessee here going down the stretch. But let's move on to Murray State, who is number 6. They have the second or third longest winning streak in the nation right now. Only the 2 losses for them, and they will keep cruising in the OVC. Number 11 seed, we've got Indiana, who has actually lost 4 straight games. Granted, 3 of these are against ranked teams, but Indiana really needs to turn it on right now as they are in free fall. Their last 2 were against Michigan State and Wisconsin, and those were the ones since the last update. They've got a critical match at Ohio State, and I just don't think they're going to win that. Down the stretch, they should be able to beat Maryland and Minnesota, but they probably need to get one of either this Ohio State game, the Rutgers game, an up-and-coming Rutgers team, and then at Purdue. Speaking of Rutgers, they're not on here, but they are on the edge of the bubble. That is one of the hottest teams in the nation, probably top 10 they're playing like right now. They beat 4 ranked opponents, and they will play Purdue, who we will get to in a moment, but they might not have their star point guard Harper for that game, so Purdue might get off easy against Rutgers there. Number 7 seed, we've got Xavier, who just lost to St. John, so they will need to turn it up down the stretch in the Big East if they want a better seed than this. And number 10, we've got North Carolina, who just suffered a brutal loss last night. They did not look as good as they've looked over the past couple weeks. Speaking of number 2, Purdue, obviously they suffered that loss to Michigan, but this is still a very solid team, and I would not be surprised if they're able to capitalize on this rugged Big Ten and be able to rise to the 1 seed line. Then we've got Gonzaga at the number 1. They're just cruising in the WCC. Then number 8, Arkansas obviously suffered the loss against Bama, but this is still one of the best teams right now. That's why they stay at the 8 seed. They did beat Auburn last week, but that was already factored into the video before. This is one of the top 8 seeds here, and they would play Seton Hall, who's a very solid team out of the Big East. However, they have lost 2 straight in this brutal stretch. They played 3 ranked teams in a row, losing the last 2 at Villanova and at UConn. Those are extremely tough games. Now they've got a couple bounce backs against DePaul and Butler, and their schedule really opens up down the stretch. They do have a road date at Xavier and then at Creighton at the end of this season, but this Pirates team should be a lock for the tournament at this point, assuming they don't lose those easy games. Moving on to LSU, they've bounced back with 3 straight since their free fall, and they stay at the 5 seed just because the metrics love them, as a lot of their losses were close, so the net rankings seem to like them. Then we've got SMU and Miami, and SMU has been the most up and down team over the past week. They beat Houston at home in a crazy sequence. I would advise you guys to watch the highlights of that one if you haven't seen it. And then they come back and lose a game in American Conference play. I just don't know what to say about this SMU team, but ultimately they're in a better place than they were last week. They're in the field for me, but with the bid bandits and whatnot, they might need to win that second game over Houston just to solidify that spot or do very well in the American Conference tournament. As for Miami, they just got a big win at Wake Forest and then came back and won at Louisville as well. Solid Miami team, and they don't really have much going down the stretch. A home date against Virginia Tech, who is another bubble team, so that will be big for both of them. Moving on down to number 4 seed Illinois. Illinois obviously just lost to Rutgers last night in an extremely tough environment. Illinois has been up and down recently, but I'm not really worried about this team. The Big Ten has been rugged like it was last year, and even if they don't grab that 1 or 2 seed, this is still a very solid team and worth a watch for in the tournament. Number 3 seed, we've got Texas Tech, who just downed Baylor last night in that epic matchup. Texas Tech, I wouldn't be surprised if they are able to get up to a 2 or 1 seed right now, but for now they're stuck at the 3 line. Down from them, we've got number 6 seed Providence, and there's been a lot of talk about this team recently. You know, they just lost the game against Villanova on their home court. That's a top 10 Villanova team, but you know, you guys may not like this 6 seed, but I don't really know what to put under Providence, and I think this weekend when we get the top 16 teams will determine a lot about it. The predictive rankings such as the BPI, the KPI, etc. do not like Providence. They have them ranked about 40th. The net rankings doesn't disagree all that much. They've got them at about 30th, and this team only has 3 losses and is playing a brutal schedule, so results-based metrics like the strength of record, like Providence as a top 10 team. They only have 3 losses. The problem is they were 11-0 in 5-point games, including 2 monster out-of-conference wins over Wisconsin, and this Providence team has just been very lucky over this stretch of the year, but I think they played very close to Nova. They really needed that game, but honestly, this is a solid 6 seed and might even be underrated. We'll see if they come out in the top 4 seeds in the committee. They were a 5 seed here last week, but that loss drops them down. Comment your thoughts down below. But then we move on to Memphis, who is rolling right now ever since Penny lashed back at the media. They've won 6 or 7 straight, including that monster win over Houston, a reeling Houston squad, but still counts for Memphis, and now they are solidly in the field of 68 for me right now. Moving on, we've got number 7 seed Iowa and number 10 seed Notre Dame, who just survived a scare against Boston College last night in overtime. Number 2, Baylor doesn't really drop, even though they lost to Texas Tech. They did lose one of their star players, though, so that is something to watch for down the stretch of the season here. Moving on to the bottom of the bracket, we've got a third 1 seed in Kentucky. They would play Longwood. Kentucky's been rolling, obviously lost to Tennessee in that brutal matchup, but this is still a very talented squad. Number 8, Marquette would play number 9, Iowa State, who has been reeling recently, but they did get that clutch win over TCU. So we'll see what happens with Iowa State in a rugged Big 12 conference that is wide open, not necessarily for them, but for the others. Number 5 seed Alabama has been making big moves over the past couple weeks. They just escaped a close victory over Mississippi State at home, and I don't really know what to think of Alabama. They can beat the best teams and lose to the worst teams, but for now they're a 5 seed. They've played the hardest strength of schedule in the nation, and they've done pretty well with it despite the 9 losses. Number 4 seed, we've got UCLA, who continues to roll in the Pac-12. They've got a date with the Washington schools this weekend. Duke at the 3 seed had a scare against Wake Forest the other night, and Coach K went out of the game, but they survived and will advance as a 3 seed. USC moves up to the 6 line from the 7 after their win over UCLA. They would play number 11 Belmont, and then you've got 7 seed Colorado State, who just picked up the monster road victory at Boise State. There was a lot of controversy about it late in regulation. Should Boise State have gotten the out of bounds call and the ball back? They did end up getting the ball back, but there was a lot of controversy about a potential foul call, etc. So Colorado State did end up winning it. You see on the other side, Boise State drops to the 10 seed because of that. Michigan moves up to the 10 seed as they beat Purdue but lost to Ohio State. You can't really fault them for losing either of those games, but just getting one win was enough to put them and vault them into the tournament. Obviously, Nova stays strong at a 2 seed. Actually, they moved up a seed line after that monster win over Providence. And then looking on the left side of the bracket, we've got Auburn playing Cleveland State. Auburn obviously has bounced back from that loss at Arkansas to 2 straight wins over Texas A&M and Vanderbilt, both comfortably. Their last test of the season will be at Tennessee, where Kentucky failed to secure the win. So you guys notice here that we've got 2 SEC 1 seeds. And will that be able to remain the case? Well, both of those teams are probably going to have to win out and then meet in their conference championship for that to stay. Number 8 seed, we've got Wyoming, who just dropped 1 to New Mexico. That is an ugly loss for them. And then San Francisco continues to roll with that quad win over Santa Clara. And then they beat Pepperdine by 44 points. San Francisco has a pivotal match against St. Mary's tonight. Keep your eye on that if you're a mid-major basketball fan. Number 5 seed, we've got UConn, who grabbed a pair of wins over St. John's and Seton Hall. Down the stretch, they've got another date with Villanova, so that will be interesting. And I believe they have a bunch of postponed games that they have to redo, including one against Providence. Then they'd play Davidson or Oklahoma. Oklahoma, honestly, is literally the last team in right now. They are a very bad team, as they've lost 9 of their past 11 games. Granted, 7 of those have been against ranked teams, but this is starting to become something like a Trae Young Oklahoma squad. They're 14-12. The metrics love them and continue to love them because of that strength of schedule and how close they're playing these teams. But I don't know that this team will be able to make it. Most people don't have Oklahoma in, but I just have them in because the metrics just love Oklahoma right now. They played a brutal out-of-conference schedule, and down the stretch, they've got some easier games that I think they can pick up here and maybe make the tournament. They almost have to win out. They have one more ranked opportunity at Texas Tech. I don't think they'll win that, but right now they're the last team in. Number 4, Wisconsin continues to battle for the top spot in the Big Ten, and then aforementioned Houston, who dropped 2 games last week, only dropped 1 seed line, but that's a misnomer because they went from the worst 2 to the worst 3, so they're almost to 4 right now. Then we've got Michigan State at the 6th seed, who sneakily has lost 3 of 4 in their own right. Their most recent one is a loss at Penn State, so we'll see if they can bounce back as they play Illinois at home. I think they've got a very good chance at that. The week later, they play Purdue at home, so they have plenty of opportunities to up that seed. TCU lost that game to Iowa State, as I mentioned before. St. Mary's lost 2 last week against Santa Clara and Gonzaga, but rallied to their 20th win. They stay at the 7 line because of that was a brutal schedule that week. They've got that showdown I already mentioned against USF. Then Boise State suffered the heartbreaking loss at Colorado State, but they've got 2 games against premier Mountain West competition to see if they can hold on to this spot in the bracket. If they lose either of them, they're probably going to drop a seed line. Then we've got Kansas, who continues to be great out of the Big 12, winning against both Oklahoma schools after their loss to Texas. So that is the bracket right now. Let me know if you have any predictions or comments below, and please subscribe to the channel for more college basketball content to come. Thanks for watching.